You ever hear the saying, hunting's a way to embrace nature, connect with your primal instincts? Well, let me tell you about the time I went hunting, and the only thing I connected with was sheer terror. It was a crisp autumn morning when my buddies Mike and Jake and I decided to head into the woods for a day of hunting. We were experienced hunters, or so we thought, and this trip was supposed to be like any other. But you know what they say about the best laid plans. We had set out before the sun came up, and as we trudged through the forest, the only sounds were the rustling leaves and the occasional chirping of birds. The air was chilly, and the scent of fallen leaves and damp earth filled our nostrils. Our goal for the day was to bag some deer. We had all our gear, rifles, camouflage, backpacks filled with supplies, and a steady determination to make the trip worthwhile. We knew this forest like the back of our hands, or so we thought. We split up to cover more ground, a rookie mistake in hindsight. Mike went to the east, Jake took the west, and I headed south. We were each radio equipped to stay in touch, but with the dense woods and rocky terrain, the signal wasn't always reliable. As I stalked through the underbrush, I couldn't help but marvel at the serenity of the forest. The trees reached for the sky, their leaves an explosion of vibrant reds and yellows. It was hard not to feel like a part of something bigger, to feel at one with nature. But that feeling was short-lived. Hours passed, and despite my best efforts, I hadn't spotted any deer. I cursed my bad luck and decided to radio Mike and Jake to regroup. That's when things took a bizarre turn. I couldn't get a signal on my radio, no matter how much I tried. I figured it was just bad luck and decided to backtrack to find the guys. That's when I heard it. A faint, eerie chanting, almost like a haunting whisper on the wind. It sent shivers down my spine, and I strained to pinpoint the source. There, not far from me, was a small clearing. I approached cautiously and peered through the thick underbrush to see a group of people dressed in tattered rags, standing in a circle and chanting in an unfamiliar language. My blood ran cold. What on earth was this? I watched in shock as they seemed to be in some sort of trance, swaying back and forth. Their faces were obscured by the hooded robes they wore, and I couldn't make out their features. It was a sight right out of a horror movie, and I couldn't tear my eyes away. Suddenly, they stopped chanting and turned their heads towards me in unison. I froze, unable to move, my heart pounding in my chest. For a moment, I thought they hadn't seen me, but then one of them pointed in my direction. Panic set in, and I turned and ran as fast as my legs would carry me. The woods seemed to close in around me, and the echoing footfalls of the cult members followed me through the trees. I glanced back over my shoulder, and to my horror, they were gaining on me. My heart raced, and I pushed myself to run even faster, the sound of their footsteps growing louder. Just when it felt like I couldn't run any longer, I burst into a small clearing. In the center was a large ancient oak tree, its branches twisted and gnarled. It was like something out of a nightmare. I took shelter behind the tree, trying to catch my breath and slow my racing heart, but the cult members had me surrounded, their eerie chanting growing louder as they closed in. I was trapped, and there was nowhere to run. I felt a sense of hopelessness, like a trapped animal about to meet its fate. Then, just as they were about to reach me, something extraordinary happened. A gust of wind swirled around the clearing, and the leaves on the ground began to dance in a frenzy. The cult members were knocked off their feet, tumbling backward, their hoods flying off to reveal their faces twisted in surprise. And here's the twist, my friend. Just when I thought I was a goner, the cult members weren't what I had expected. They were just regular people, as scared and confused as I was. They had been lured into the woods by someone or something, just like me. The wind continued to howl, and I felt myself being lifted off the ground, as though I were caught in the grip of some supernatural force. The cult members and I were tossed about like leaves in a storm, our terrified screams lost in the wind. When I finally landed, I was back in the forest alone. The cult members were nowhere to be seen. I stumbled through the woods, disoriented and shaken, trying to make sense of what had just happened. Had it all been a hallucination, a figment of my imagination? When I finally found my way back to the cabin, I was a wreck. Mike and Jake were already there, having had their own unsettling encounters. We decided to pack up and leave, not wanting to spend another second in those woods. As we drove away, I couldn't shake the feeling that something dark and malevolent lurked in those trees. Maybe it was just a bunch of lost souls, or maybe it was something far more sinister. All I knew was that I would never venture into those woods again. So, my friend, the next time you head into the great outdoors, be prepared for the unexpected. Nature is a powerful force, and sometimes the line between reality and the supernatural can blur in the most unsettling ways. And if you ever hear that haunting whisper on the wind, do yourself a favor and run as fast as you can. Hunting has always been a thrill for me, a way to unwind, escape the hustle and bustle of everyday life, and bask in the beauty of the great outdoors. But there was one hunting trip that I'll never forget, one that went horribly wrong and left me questioning my beliefs about the natural world. It was early autumn, and the leaves had started to turn fiery shades of red and gold. The air was crisp, and I was eager to hit the woods. Armed with my trusty rifle and a backpack filled with supplies, I set out into the wilderness, ready to track down some game. I'd been hearing stories about strange occurrences in these woods, sightings of bizarre creatures, unexplained sounds, and eerie tales from the locals. Some said it was just campfire folklore, but my curiosity got the better of me. I was heading deeper into the forest when I came across a set of tracks that I couldn't identify. They were like nothing I'd ever seen before, strange clawed imprints with 3 toes, all leading in the same direction. The hairs on the back of my neck stood on end, but I couldn't resist following them. As I continued, the woods grew silent, and a heavy, oppressive feeling settled over me. The air seemed charged with an otherworldly energy, like the calm before a storm. I moved cautiously, with my finger resting lightly on the trigger of my rifle. That's when I saw it, a creature like none I'd ever imagined. It had leathery, translucent skin and jagged spines running down its back. Its eyes were a sickly, luminescent yellow, and its teeth were long, sharp, and gleaming. It moved silently, with an unnerving grace, and its gaze locked onto me. Fear clenched my chest, and I barely had time to react before I fired a shot at it. The shot hit home, and the creature let out an otherworldly shrill scream. But instead of collapsing, it seemed to shimmer, as if it were made of pure energy, and then it vanished into thin air. I couldn't believe my eyes. What had I just encountered? My heart pounded in my chest as I tried to make sense of what had happened. The creature had been real, but it had also been something more, something I couldn't begin to comprehend. I knew I had to get out of there, but my curiosity and fear kept me rooted to the spot. Hours passed, and I didn't see any sign of the creature. I was about to call it a day and head back when it appeared again, this time in a shimmering, ghostly form. It had brought along some friends, and they were circling me, their eerie eyes locked onto mine. I raised my rifle and fired a few shots, but they passed right through the creatures as if they were nothing more than apparitions. Panic set in as I realized I was completely defenseless. There was no escape. Just when it felt like I was done for, a deafening roar pierced the air, and a massive, hulking creature emerged from the shadows. It was like a guardian from a nightmare, with dark, mottled skin and rows of razor-sharp teeth. It lunged at the ghostly creatures, tearing through them as if they were made of smoke. The battle was fierce and otherworldly, a clash between the living and the spectral. The guardian creature fought with a ferocity I'd never seen, and it was clear that it had come to my aid. It wasn't long before the ghostly creatures were vanquished, disappearing in puffs of smoke. The guardian creature turned its attention to me, its massive form casting a shadow over me. I thought I was next on the menu, but to my surprise, it just stared at me with those eerie eyes, as if it were trying to communicate something. And here's the twist, my friend. Just when I thought I'd faced my worst nightmare, the guardian creature didn't harm me. Instead, it turned and vanished into the woods, leaving me shaken and bewildered. I eventually made my way back to civilization, with a story no one would believe. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd stumbled onto something inexplicable, something beyond the realm of the natural world. In the days that followed, I couldn't stop thinking about the creatures I'd encountered and the guardian that had saved me. What were they? Where had they come from? I realized that the world was far more mysterious and complex than I had ever imagined. My life had been forever changed by that hunting trip, and I couldn't help but wonder if there were other creatures lurking in the shadows, just beyond the reach of our understanding. I was left with more questions than answers, and a profound sense that there were things in this world that defied explanation. So, my friend, the next time you venture into the wilderness, keep your senses sharp and your wits about you. You never know what you might encounter in the deep, dark woods, and sometimes the truth can be far more terrifying than fiction. Picture this, a crisp, cool morning, the kind where the sun paints the world with soft, golden hues. I was out in the wilderness with my hunting buddies, Mark and Dave, all of us seasoned hunters who thought we knew the woods like the back of our hands. But as the saying goes, arrogance can lead to disaster, and this hunting trip proved that in spades. We had set out with the usual enthusiasm, all geared up and determined to back some game. The forest was alive with the sounds of rustling leaves and distant birdsong, and the air was scented with the earthy aroma of fallen leaves and damp moss. Our rifles, camouflage gear, and packed lunches were ready, and we had every intention of making this a successful expedition. We believed that we were the apex predators, the kings of this wilderness, but boy, were we in for a rude awakening. As we ventured deeper into the woods, Mark decided to scout ahead to find signs of deer, while Dave and I stuck together. We were equipped with walkie-talkies to keep in touch, but the dense canopy often messed with our signals. The quiet of the woods was occasionally punctuated by the snap of a twig or the distant chirp of a bird, and all was serene. But deep down, I couldn't help but feel that something was off, as if the forest were holding its breath, watching, waiting. We walked for hours, scanning the surroundings for any signs of our prey, but there was nothing. My internal alarm bells began to chime faintly. A sense of unease crept over me. Still, I brushed it aside as paranoia. Then, as we ventured deeper into the woods, I heard it, a faint, distant whisper. The voices were barely audible, like the softest rustle of leaves in the breeze. They tugged at the corners of my mind and filled me with dread. "Did you hear that?" I asked Dave, my voice trembling. "Hear what?" he replied, clearly puzzled. I waved it off as my imagination playing tricks on me. What else could it be? There was no one out here, no human presence but us. Dave and I trudged on, but the voices grew louder and more insistent, as if they were whispering directly into my ear. They weren't words but rather eerie guttural sounds, as if the forest itself was trying to communicate with me. My unease grew into fear, but Dave seemed oblivious, pressing on, as if nothing were amiss. I considered radioing Mark to let him know about the strange occurrences, but even the walkie-talkie remained silent. The voices seemed to be leading me deeper into the forest, away from Dave, away from any semblance of safety. I couldn't help but follow, my legs moving of their own accord, like I was no longer in control. That's when I saw her, a woman, dressed in tattered, dirty clothes, her hair matted with leaves and dirt. Her eyes were hollow and vacant, and her face contorted into an eerie grin that made my skin crawl. I couldn't tear my gaze away from her, and I took a few hesitant steps toward her. "Who are you?" I managed to stammer, the words escaping my lips almost involuntarily. No response, just that unsettling grin that seemed to stretch impossibly wide. My heart pounded in my chest as I continued to approach her, powerless to stop myself. Just when I was within arm's reach, the forest around us erupted in a cacophony of cackles and whispers. I tried to back away, to flee from this nightmarish apparition. It was as if my limbs were encased in lead. The woman's hands shot out and grabbed my face, her grip like iron. Her laughter was shrill and unhinged as she leaned in close, her breath foul with decay. Panic surged through me, and I struggled to break free. But it was too late. With a cruel smile, she spoke in a language I couldn't understand. And then, as if following her command, I raised my rifle to my head. The world blurred around me, and all I could hear was her laughter, echoing in the recesses of my mind. And here's the twist, my friend. Just when I thought I was about to pull the trigger, I was jolted from this nightmarish trance by the sound of a gunshot. Dave had returned, and he'd fired a shot into the air, snapping me out of the woman's control. I dropped the rifle and stumbled back, gasping for air, my heart racing as I realized what had nearly transpired. Dave rushed to my side, concerned and bewildered, but I couldn't bring myself to explain the madness I'd just experienced. How could I possibly put it into words? We retreated from the woods that day, shaken and scared by the encounter. As we left, I looked back one last time, half expecting to see the woman still there, but the forest was empty. The whispers had ceased, and the eerie presence had lifted, but I couldn't forget the woman's eyes or the feeling of being utterly controlled. It was a chilling reminder of the dark, unknown forces that can lurk in the most familiar of places. And so, my friend, remember this: even in the most tranquil and familiar settings, there may be something inexplicable and horrifying lurking in the shadows. You may think you're the one in control, but sometimes the true hunter becomes the hunted,